Phillipa Soo is a Tony and Emmy-nominated and Grammy Award-winning actress and singer. She is most well-known for originating the role of Eliza Hamilton in the Broadway musical Hamilton. Her many Broadway credits also include Amelie, Into the Woods, and The Parisian Woman. Phillipa is a co-author of the children's book Piper Chen Sings, a New York Times bestseller. Phillipa co-founded the Eliza Project in 2015 to give youth at Graham the opportunity to use the arts for expression. And I want to again thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Ms. Watson. Thank you for that introduction. I really wish I had an intro for you. We could introduce each other to each other.
So it feels like I'm talking to family. So
Yes.
when I'm talking to family, I'm very plain talking. Is that
Love it.
okay?
Yes,
Yeah.
please,
Good.
let's go.
And I feel like your family because in a sense you are. In the last 10 years since the actually maybe the following year after Hamilton opened, the connection between Graham as the orphanage, you can say the classic line,
Yeah.
and the revelation that that orphanage still exists, the work that
Yes.
Eliza was so proud of, and we're here today to be celebrating 220 years.
Amazing.
It is 220 years. We, as an organization, have lived through just about every event in American history, and which is not only a source of pride for me, particularly as a leader, and I think us as an organization, but also a source of strength.
Mm-hmm.
Source of strength. So, so you're Graham fam. That's how we refer.
I love it. And I'm going to immediately start crying already. You talking about 220 years and the connection, it's got me right back in that headspace all over again.
It's incredible, incredible. And so Graham starts out as what we would call today a group home. People don't realize that, don't know that it didn't start out as an orphanage, but because the need was so great, the need to be able to support children and families, even then, when folks didn't quite know what to call it because what was created didn't really exist in other places. Graham is the oldest non-sectarian child caring organization, and it took me a while to really understand what that meant.
Mm.
Where in most countries, even here in the United States, orphanages were run by churches or religious organizations. Graham was the first non-religious organization to be able to provide um, support and care for children, regardless of their backgrounds, religion, economic status, etc. So I'm pretty proud, always pretty proud about that.
Yes.
And so that's the Graham legacy, and we continue over these 220 years to evolve to be what communities need. But we'll talk a little bit more about that. Hamilton. So I have a whole list of questions, but let's start there. Talk about how you came into your work, into performance, the performing arts, and talk a little bit about that trajectory, how you got started.
So it all started in a little hospital in Libertyville, Illinois, where I was born. I won't go back that far, but speaking of young people, I think really this all started when I was young, and I often start when I talk about my journey as an artist and the full circle and where I'm always trying to come back to. It's that young person who has curiosity, who has drive to an extent, but more just an excitement about the unknown and a willingness to dive into things and learn and grow and fall for the sake of maybe finding something greater. And when I was a kid, I was extremely imaginative. I was playing, with my stuffed animals and my dolls in my room. And I have this very good friend that I grew up with, and she and I would play dolls. And she would always be spending hours setting up the house and like trying to getting the curtains just right and their pillows on their bed. And I would just be sitting there like, okay, but like, you know, who's their dad and who's their mom and where are they going and what's the story? What's the story? Like, what's the action? And I ended up becoming an actor and she ended up becoming an interior designer.
Wow.
So I just think it's a testament to an example of um, fostering creativity in young people
Right.
is so important because it actually could end up being what they do for a living. And God knows that thinking creatively, whether you're in the arts or not, is such an asset to the world that we live in. Every great idea started, or every great invention started out as an idea,
Right.
started out as someone being curious and creative about something. So that's really where my journey to Hamilton started. And then, got into theater in the school and did choir and I did this wonderful thing called the Illinois All-State Theater Festival where I got to meet kids from all over the state and put on a show with them and then practice, go to play practice and rehearse and do that for one weekend every month starting in about September until January. And then we put the show up on its feet. And this was with a group of strangers, really. And we all just had this passion for doing theater, and we would rehearse our little butts off, and then we would get to Illinois All-State Theater Festival, which was either at Illinois State University or University of Illinois. They would alternate year to year, and we'd put up the show in like a week. And like when I look back, I'm like, wow, that was really amazing that these high schoolers were so driven to make something and get something out there and put something on its feet. We all said yes. And it was kind of incredible.
Two things. One, I didn't know you were a Midwesterner.
Yep.
So that's so we have a little bit of shared experience.
Are you a Midwest?
I went to high school in Minnesota. So yeah, so I did my teen years there, and so that's one thing. And then you come. So I always thought you were from New York. So that's a big
Yeah.
surprise.
No,
Right?
yeah.
I'm
Midwest.
kind of blown away by that. So making I think two things are really interesting. The career choice or the choice to move forward in the performing arts, but then coming from the Midwest to New York
Mm-hmm.
and then being on Broadway,
Yeah.
what was that like? Like
Well,
that.
unexpected entirely. Growing up outside of Chicago, I saw a lot of theater in Chicago, and through friends and my mom, she worked in the theater a little bit, so I had an understanding through actors that were working in Chicago that like it was a way to make a living and a thing that you could do with your life that didn't necessarily involve becoming a famous quote unquote famous actor. Which was really intriguing to me because I was already kind of, like, I was a very shy kid growing like, I wasn't shy. I was scared to perform in front of people, though in my life, I was like, "Ah," like, super free. But when it came to performing, I got super nervous. And so this idea of, like, living and working and being an actor, but not necessarily having to be on the spot and, put yourself out there in a really public way felt really intriguing to me. And, um I wanted to study acting. So I got into theater school, which brought me to New York. And I graduated and auditioned like crazy and booked a job called a show called Natasha Pierre and the Great Comet of 1812. And that was my first professional job. And that was where Lynn Manuel Miranda and Tommy Kail saw me perform for the first time. And they invited me to come join them for some readings of Hamilton, and that's how kind of the rest is history. Yeah.
And what are they saying back in Illinois about that?
They're very excited. They're so proud.
Gosh.
I love it. It's great.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I have a confession, a confession around Hamilton. I don't know if it's safe. Should I do it or not? But I'm gonna do
Well,
it.
you can edit it out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, no, actually, it's good. Well, it involves someone who's not in the room, and so we have kind of like this code about nothing about me without me, but I'm
Oh,
gonna do it anyway.
sure. Why not?
Which is
Mhm.
so Graham was gifted with tickets to be able to go see Hamilton when it opened. And I think it was the year that we honored, was it Ron Chernow that I can't remember if it was all in the same year. So we had gotten the gift of the tickets. We'd gotten the Chernow book about Alexander Hamilton, and I remember talking to one of our colleagues who's not in the room. I don't know if it's fair to call Sharmila's name, but I'm going to do it. Who asked me if I was going to go to see Hamilton. Was I gonna use my ticket? Was I going? And I knew nothing about the production other than it was about Alexander Hamilton, and so I'm sitting there with this big, thick book, and I said, "2 hours of Alexander Hamilton? No, no, thank you. You can take my ticket." So she says she does ask me again,
Uh-huh.
"Kim, are you sure? Are you sure?" And I was like, "Yeah, I think I'm fairly sure."
Yeah.
Fast forward, everyone comes back, they talk about how great it was, how wonderful it is, and this was not like I wasn't YouTubing at the time, so, like, to go and see what it was about, but somehow I think my, son was singing, like, parts of the soundtrack. It's like,
Mhm.
listening to parts, and I was like, "Hey, that's pretty cool. What are you listening to?" He says, "Oh, this is Hamilton." And I stopped in my tracks. I said, "What?" And so I said, "Play that back," and it's I Wrote My Way Out. Like, the
Oh,
first
yeah.
time I heard that song, I cried. I seriously, like I was like, "Jalil, play that again." And I
Mm.
was like, "That's my story." Like, I wrote my way out, went to school to get out of the poverty that I, knew and grew up in. This is my story, and that's I listened to that and I was like, "Wait a minute. This was Hamilton?"
Mm.
I was, like, irate after I found out. But Sharmila absolutely, I think, knew. I don't think she knows what this is, that this is not gonna be
Oh, you
your.
don't want your ticket?
Yeah, right, exactly. You
Okay.
sure
Oh,
can.
that's too
So
bad.
we have a laugh about that now.
Well, you've seen it?
Yes,
Yes.
I have.
Thank God.
Love
That's
Listen,
so
the
cool.
soundtrack is like, my children. I have grands, my grands. I mean, we all, absolutely love it. And again, not just taking history and refashioning history. It's not that. It really is, I think for me anyway, understand like being almost in the position of understanding who this man was as an individual, the challenges that he had personally, and then what was happening nationally, like what was
Mhm.
happening in our nation, that there's so much that I know I could identify with, and that I think many of us could identify with. So, talk about identification with being Eliza, like how.
Oh gosh. It was a very emotional and powerful journey getting to know her as a person because really there wasn't a lot available.
Right, that's right.
I had to do some digging and I also think even more important than the facts, my job is to understand what makes a person do what they need to do in their lives.
Yeah.
And um I was so struck by her fortitude, her love, her capacity for loving so many people and loving Alexander Hamilton so much that she needed to do this for him after he passed. It was really inspiring just for me as a person, as a young adult. I certainly, it was the first time that I really understood my identity as an American citizen and what it looks like to participate in democracy. And also, as an artist, what does it look like to tell a story where the agenda is not to answer questions, but to ask them? And especially for Eliza, um, I felt this responsibility, especially because there's a physical manifestation of her love and her work, Graham Windham. It became even more palpable, this desire to really do her story
Yeah.
justice. And at first, it was very daunting, but then I sort of released into just the beauty and the compassion that she had for humanity. And that was my story. That was my journey on stage was my love for him, my love for my sisters, the
Mhm.
power of sisterhood. I mean, eh, it just had so much to unearth that being in a show for a year, I still feel like there's things that I can go back and dig out and look into, and it's just, I think, a testament to how wonderful the writing is and how wonderful their legacy and their story is.
Yeah. I don't know if it's fair to you, but, to think about being the Eliza that, um, that folks will know going forward, say, for the next generation or so, that you're Eliza. There are not lots and lots of pictures of her.
Mhm.
There are some that have become, like, when we this is Eliza, right? But
Yeah.
there are not lots and lots of pictures. By her own, volition, there's not a lot of letters and, things that chronicle,
Mhm.
who she was.
Yeah, she took herself
That's
out
right,
of the
out of it,
narrative.
yeah,
Yeah.
and when we think about the role of women in that time, and how diminished,
Mm.
the women were, that Eliza and the women who founded Graham, of which we're so proud, were really, they were really way ahead of their time and really began, I think, to lay down the footprints, I think, that other women leaders would walk in,
Yes.
the path that they would walk in.
Yes.
And so, for you to be almost kind of like the embodiment of the characteristics and the virtues that Eliza, demonstrated, I think, is so powerful. And um, what do you think about that in terms of you being the person who kind of makes sure that that legacy continues in your personification of her role?
Oh my gosh, it's an honor, truly. Um, I think to be able to say that I get to tell stories for a living is already such an honor and a privilege. I wouldn't change it for the world, with all of its ups and downs and crazy things that happen as being an actor. But I think the responsibility of stepping into someone's shoes, let alone someone who actually was a living, breathing person in the world, um, it's I mean, I don't even know how else to describe it other than the greatest honor of an artist's life to be able to do that and to be able to, share with other people a small way into a way a person thinks.
Yeah.
Not just, what did they do? What are the facts? Who did they marry? Who are their children? But to really look into a person's soul and find it somewhere between all of the facts, the person that was behind all of the things that you read about them. And what kind of a person dedicates their life's work to serving others?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where did they grow up? What kinds of things did they experience? And it's almost so simple, but I think the assignment was really to allow myself to be a vessel for the story,
Yeah.
as opposed to feeling like I needed to be the Eliza for everybody. I was like,
Mhm.
I was really actually more interested in serving her story the way that she was serving other people in her lifetime. I really wanted to, and maybe you can sort of see it in the performance, but I really thought that she was such a good listener. She struck me as being someone who's very observant, bubbly and loving, especially as you see her grow from her youth to her
Mhm.
older age, but someone that just has a very large capacity to take in so much because she really did, and she was able to handle it for the rest of her life. So that was my only job, truly, was just to be there, make sure everything that I said was clear, say the words, and allow her journey to wash over me so that other people can also feel that journey.
Philippa, I think that is so right. And the quality of listening. I've asked myself since I've been at Graham, how is it that some of the qualities we saw in our founding mothers continues to this day in the leadership and in the folks who commit to doing this work. Those same qualities kind of have continued along a long time, and then along the trajectory of time. And so listening is absolutely right, that first of all, when we think about her beginnings and the family and the stock she came from, she did not have to take up this work. She did
Yes.
not have to do it.
Yeah.
That's to start. Secondly, she was the mother of many children. And so one would think, well, she's got her hands filled full with her own kids and her own concerns, and we already know the financial situation that she was in after Alexander died, was killed.
Mm.
And she could have totally have been absorbed with her own condition. Yet she was not. She had these other ventures that were so important for her to carry through. And so, when I think about the fact that she didn't have to do this, but she chose to. And listening being, I think, we were talking earlier about superpowers, right? Love being a superpower, listening being her superpower. So today, Graham, we have this thing we call radical listening, which is a component.
I love that.
Isn't that wonderful?
What
And
is radical
and
listening?
we say radical listening leads to radical change. And it really is about not listening. So when folks listen, they listen so that they can, all right, come on, let's get to the heart of what it
Yes.
is that I got to do, what I got to hear, what I have to respond to.
Mm.
Radical listening is different from that. Radical listening really involves um, being in the dialogue,
Mhm.
trying to come to an understanding of what it is that you're concerned about, not what I want to do, how I want to resolve this, and just move on to the next thing.
Yes.
And then in doing that, finding the solution in what it is you're saying. Like many times we have the answer, but it sometimes it takes the culling to pull it out, to pull it
Yes.
forward.
Yes.
And that the change or the solution we're trying to get to really comes because we've listened, because we really are listening to understand. We're asking the questions that make it that pull out what it is that the information that we need to know so that you know, to get to the next step, to provide the helpful help, something
Yeah.
that we also have coined, that it's coming directly from what we've learned because we've engaged in this process of communication that is not just trying to get to the end of what it is you're saying.
Yeah.
And so many times it's really about that, right? It's not active listening. It's not really reflective, but it's I just want to hear what you're getting to. So either I can respond or
Uh,
I can move along my way. Radical listening is not that.
Radical listening to me feels like a choice to put yourself in a vulnerable position
Mm.
of which is I think
Mhm.
great. I think vulnerability is like it's literally everything I do is about seeking places where you can find vulnerability
Mm.
because that's where I think great acting happens. But speaking to radical listening and choosing to put yourself in a vulnerable position where you might say, I don't know, or I can't do this by myself. I actually need to put my energy towards something else and receive something in order to move forward and do something for myself. That this idea of self-care is holistic, that it's not just about yourself, it's about the whole world.
World, right.
And that and the more that we can see ourselves as a part of a whole, yes, we are a single organism in all of this, but we are a part of a whole will immediately open up ourselves to all sorts of wonderful things that could change our life.
Abilities. That's right.
Possibility, yeah.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. And I love that. Did we write that down? We're gonna make sure that we write it down.
It's
That
recorded.
that's
Hear it
yeah, yeah,
now.
yeah. That's right. That is excellent. That is excellent. And yes, you're right that it opens the receiver up and the giver of that information or um it's absolutely right. The two-way
But
process.
also I love that it's radical in the sense that it might not be perfect.
Right.
Like you're going out on a limb. It might actually fall on its face. It might be very messy, this exchange, but it's there. Like there's an energy
That's
that's
right.
percolating between you and another person, or you and a group, or a group and a group. And that is something. That's like the power of what humans can do.
That's exactly right. And
Yeah.
how it is when we look over the years of what Graham has, the innovation that Graham has been a part of creating along with, because there's nothing that Graham does alone. We do it in partnership with the families, in partnership with kids. When we think about what that process has looked like, it is just what you described. It's not linear, it's not clean. Often we've got to go backtrack to
Mhm.
make sure that we heard it, got it right, and that we're not running ahead. We call it running ahead to solution. Like trying, oh,
Mhm.
so that's what it is? No, 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 no,
Yeah.
no, no. Back up. There's more to this. So the work that we're doing, for example, we're doing this work that we've called reckoning work, which is addressing the harms
Mm.
of the child welfare system. And for many folks, this is radical to look at it and talk about it that way, when I think most folks would think, well, child services or working with children and families should always be helpful, and why should anyone be harmed? But the truth of the matter is that it's not always helpful. But in the reckoning work we're doing, listening and talking to to youth, to parents, to community partners, to our staff who do this work, is to number one, put away the assumptions, put away the defenses, and get and really listen to and hear what um what the reality of our involvement with those families.
I love what you guys do. I've always loved what you guys do. And it's a great reminder just in my own life. I shouldn't be surprised if I ever feel like it shouldn't be messy, because I think the world also is telling us that we're meant to get things right away, that if you buy this, then therefore you'll feel that. Like, it's all a part of
Okay.
this very
Telling us how to feel.
commercial, capitalist, like, strategized plan on how to be a good human. And I just love that there's a level of catering to all the multifaceted ways that we present and show ourselves in the world as people, that we're not always linear,
Yeah, that's right.
you know?
That's exactly
Yeah.
that. So there's two things I want to talk about before we end today. Eliza Project.
Mm.
Talk about the creation of the Eliza Project and what that meant for you and
Yeah,
that work.
it was so magical at a time where it felt like the world was going so fast. I felt like I looked forward to those sessions, every time. I think it was like a handful of times that we met with the students, and Morgan Marcel, my castmate, she and I created the Eliza Project. And it really just came from figuring out that Graham Wyndham was a real place and that I could go there and it was still real. I mean, I was like, "What? This is crazy." And, being so moved by my experience there and meeting the staff and meeting the students and the faculty, I just thought like, "Oh, what an opportunity to connect." I had done some work, teaching in college, and, um, my summer job growing up was teaching kids theater, so, like,
Uh-huh.
I was really excited to maybe get a chance to connect and, with such gratitude towards Graham Wyndham and making it happen for us. We got to spend some sessions working with the kids and young adults, I should say. I mean, they were just so awesome and so creative. And some of the cast came and we got to play some theater games, do some exercises, theater exercises, make some music, have some laughs, do some improv. And, I think that, joy was had by all, and I like to think that, somewhere, wherever Eliza is in this moment, her soul, her spirit, there's a level of acknowledgement that, this couldn't have happened without her.
Eliza Project.
Mm.
Talk about the creation of the Eliza Project.
We wouldn't otherwise have. Like, that's kind of why I became an artist, like, the chance to meet new people and see new faces and connect and get to know people. I think that's really powerful, and I'm really, really grateful that we got to do it.
Yeah. And again, again, your legacy, right? That there are going to be youth who are going to remember those moments and those opportunities with you and the work that you all did there.
Well, thank
And
you.
how much that will influence some of how the ways in which they show up.
I hope. Yeah, I hope. I mean, it was brief, but I think that there's something to be said about taking a step away from your sort of normal schedule and taking time to really engage with a young person. I think it's awesome.
So today is election day in New York City.
I voted today. I'm so happy.
And I'm not going to ask you who you voted for. I'm not going to do that. But there's no accident that that today is the day that we agreed to podcast. The question I guess I'd want to ask is when we look at the city and we look at everything that's in front of us locally here in New York, nationally, what do you think about leadership? What do you think the New York needs today in terms of its leader, its next mayoral year?
I'm looking forward. I'm hopeful. I'm actually really excited about the prospects of something new. New ideas. We're living in a very intense time. And I'm really excited that there's a lot of young people getting involved in politics that are running. Um, I'm really excited, even though, it's the numbers are still crawling, but like we're getting more young people engaged, which is really exciting. Um, I've been less interested in politics
Right.
in my adult life than I am in just democracy in
Mm.
general. And this idea of coming together and making a decision as a society about someone that we want to represent us. I mean, it's like, come on, like this is what Hamilton was fighting for.
Yeah, right.
Like literally don't throw away your shot. So, for the podcast, anyone who's listening and watching, like please like go check your registration, go out there, vote. Doing research on candidates takes a cup of coffee and sitting down at your table and going on the computer and just looking up some facts. Like it seems daunting. It can seem like there's a lot of information out there, but it is one of the great things about this country that we have the power to make a decision like that. So don't waste it. I want to encourage, especially young people, like go out and do it. It's great. It's fun. We
Yeah.
can make a whole thing of it. And I also think this meeting, not only on election day, but I'm actually going to go see Hamilton tonight.
Are you really?
I am, because Leslie Odom Jr.
Is back
in the show.
Yeah.
So I think this whole day has been very fortuitous.
So do you watch it from the front, or do you get to
I don't know where I'm sitting.
where you get to be?
I don't know where I'll be, but I definitely don't want to scare Leslie. I don't want to show up and then have him be super surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you? Would you consider returning to the cast?
Since Leslie's gone back, I've definitely done that thought experiment for myself. There is a thing called the actor's nightmare where you have a dream that you're in a show that you once did, and they say, go. And in my version of this dream, I don't have the same costume. The stage is completely different, but they're saying, you're doing Hamilton in 5 minutes, go. And I don't know any of the choreography.
So I was curious about that. Like, how much do you retain of that? Like, how much do you actually retain, or does it in time? I know this is like
No, I'm gonna really like I'm gonna be really vulnerable in this moment.
okay.
I don't think I really remember any of it. I mean, I do. I remember a lot of it.
I can imagine.
Mostly the stuff that's not mine, because I was sitting backstage or sitting on stage listening to it. So I actually remember everybody else's parts very
That's
much
good.
better than my own. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I could absolutely see that you would have to, in some ways, kind of like push it to the back of your brain in order to make space for
Yeah, that's
the new.
yes.
Yeah,
A little bit more space for other things.
absolutely could see that.
Yeah. But I've thought about it, and gosh, like it would be so beautiful to and what a rare thing to get to do, even to go back and do a show 10 plus years later and revisit a role. I mean, that's just like nobody gets to do that. I mean, how many shows last that long?
That long. Yeah, I was thinking that.
So
Right.
yeah, it would be amazing.
One last thing. Your book.
Yeah,
Talk to us about it.
I wrote a children's book called Piper Chen Sings. I co-wrote it with Maris Pasquale Doran, who is also my sister-in-law.
Oh.
And we wrote it we started writing it before the pandemic, wrote it mostly over FaceTime. And then we got it published in 2024, April 2024, and we were a New York Times bestseller. We were so proud of it. Um, but it's been so amazing since the seed of this tiny idea. We really just wanted to offer something to young people at a time that seemed very confusing, even for us as adults. And what we came up with was a beautiful story about a little girl who learns to overcome her nervous emotions. And it's a multi-generational story. It's a multicultural story.
I love her name, Piper Jen.
Piper, yeah, she's so sweet. It's a story that teaches language. It's a story that uplifts the arts, but ultimately it's a story about how to navigate very tricky feelings. And I really, a testament to my wonderful co-author Maris. She's a psychotherapist and she works with adults, but in her practice talks a lot about self-awareness and the tools that one might use to be able to engage with your own emotions and be aware and have agency in how you move through life. And it's been really powerful to see the community response. And Spotty the dog is a huge hit.
Yeah.
We love that. But ultimately, I've just enjoyed seeing, my friends text me and, they're like, oh, I'm reading Piper Chen with my kid, and they'll send me a picture. And it's the sweetest feeling. Nothing beats it.
There's something about when you were talking about yourself as a child, when your friend was figuring out how to lay out the set to your story, and you're wanting to really understand what's the story, what are we saying, what are we telling? There's something that feels connected between that, you as this young child, and you as an adult doing that same exercise with your sister-in-law and writing
Yeah,
the book.
definitely. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of our conversations were about, my childhood specifically, because this little girl, it's like you're sort of like a mini me, like, or like an avatar version of me. Not really me, but an extension of me. And we got to talk about a lot of childhood stories and growing up and our perception of the world versus what was really going on,
Yeah.
and how there's something really beautiful actually about that miscommunication between kids and adults, that they're really experiencing something so fully and so intensely, and as adults we sort of look at them like, what is going on? But that powerful moment when a kid can sort of switch from their own volition, like make that switch and just really figure something out, is such a beautiful thing to witness. And I feel like, if I'm ever like, oh gosh, like how would I make it through? Like what would I tell my younger self? What would I tell my younger self in this moment? How would she be looking at the world? What actually do I have that benefits me now that she didn't have at that moment,
Yeah, wisdom that comes with
Yes.
yeah, I said that real well.
Age.
Phillipa, I want to thank you so much
Thank you so
for
much.
joining me this today. So Graham is we're celebrating our 220th anniversary. The nation is celebrating 250 years. And there's no, it's just, I think so aligned, so aligned. You're a Graham fam. So I hope that there's some opportunity for you to celebrate with us
I
in
would
this coming
love
year.
to. I would love to.
I'm glad you said that.
Thank you.
I could think of a few ways.
Great.
Thank you so much for
Thank
coming.
you.
Mwah.
I appreciate you. Thanks, guys.
For 220 years, Graham has supported children and families and communities in New York City. We need your help as we continue that vision and that mission. Join our movement.